Hi students, today we are going to discuss a very important chapter, the first chapter in the second block. The title of the second block is Heights of Harmony. What do you mean by the expression harmony? Harmony is a situation in which people are peaceful and agree with each other. So, to live a harmonious life, to have a harmonious coexistence or a peaceful coexistence, we need certain qualities. We need certain values. People have to uphold certain virtues. And the entire second block revolves around these virtues which are very essential to have a peaceful or a harmonious coexistence. For a country like India to flourish, for a country like India to thrive or prosper, these qualities are very essential because we consider our land as a land of diversities. We find a multitude of diversities in our country. No other country in the world on the planet can boast of such diversities. The beauty of our country is its plurality. We have a large number of religions, a large number of castes, a large number of traditions, rituals. So many diversities can be seen in our country. Just think about the different races. When we come to the south, Dravidian race is there. When we go to the north, we can find Aryans. Northeast, there you find Mongoloid race. When we go to the Andamans, we find the Negroids. So different races are there, different languages are there, different religions are there, different customs, traditions, ritual arts are there. So many diversities are there in our country, and the beauty of our country is its plurality, is its diversity. In such a country, we need certain virtues. People have to uphold certain virtues. Only then this country will thrive. And two virtues are highlighted there in the text. The twin virtues are the first one, tolerance, and the second one, fraternity. You are familiar with the expression fraternity as you studied the famous motto of French Revolution, liberty, equality, and fraternity in your high school social science classes. Fraternity means friendship and mutual support within a group, or we can use that simple expression brotherhood. So fraternity is very important for a country like India to thrive, for a society, for a pluralistic society like India to thrive, to develop, for a pluralistic culture like India to thrive or prosper. We need fraternity. People have to respect each other, love each other, or their relationships should be friendly, and also they have to support each other. And the second important virtue discussed there is tolerance. What do you mean by tolerance? It is the ability to accept the views of others even though you disagree with those views. Even though you disagree or disapprove the views of others, you are willing to accept their views. So it is a very important trait that we have to uphold in a country like India, because we have to live with compromises. We have to adjust with others, live with compromises, adjust with others, tolerate the differences. Because I have already told you, this is a land of differences. This is a land of diversities. We have to tolerate the differences. We have to live with compromises, adjust with people. Only then our country will prosper. The chapters in the second block speak about all these virtues which we need to have a peaceful coexistence, which we need to have a harmonious coexistence. So the first chapter in the second block, The title of the chapter is Mending Wall. That title is very significant, and we will discuss the significance, the importance and relevance of that title a little later in the coming sessions. This poem is written by a very famous American poet, Robert Frost, who is regarded as the national poet of United States of America. Robert Frost says, a poem begins in delight and ends in wisdom. Most of his poems begin in delight and end in wisdom. This poem also begins in delight and ends in wisdom. Most of the poems of Robert Frost, they have a large number of different layers of meanings. So many interpretations are possible for his poems, and most of the students studied two important poems of Robert Frost in their high school classes. Most probably, most of you have studied those two poems. One is Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, and the second one is Road Not Taken. Two beautiful poems by Robert Frost. So, the poem Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. The last stanza is so significant. The last stanza is so important. The lines, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep, and miles to go before I sleep. Those lines were on the office desk of the first Prime Minister of India, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Those lines remind us of our responsibilities, our duties that we have to fulfill, the dreams that we have to fulfill, the duties that we have to complete before the final sleep, before our death. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru kept those lines on his office table, and he thought that these lines would always remind him of his duties and responsibilities before that final sleep. The duties and responsibilities that he had to fulfill, that he had to complete before his final sleep, death. There may be distractions. There may be distractions, there may be temptations, but we should stay focused. We have to get our priorities fixed, try to achieve our goal. So this is the essence of those lines. This poem, Mending Wall, also is very profound. On the surface, you find the poem very simple, but when you go deep down, you find the poem very profound. You find the poem has different meanings, different layers of meanings, different interpretations are possible for this poem, Mending Wall. Here I am going to read out the first four lines of the poem Mending Wall by Robert Frost. Mending Wall, Robert Frost. Something there is that doesn't love a wall, that sends a frozen ground swell under it, and spills the upper boulders in the sun, and makes gaps even two can pass abreast. The poem Mending Wall by Robert Frost consists of 45 lines. And the poem is divided into two parts. The first part consists of 27 lines, and the second part consists of 18 lines. The title Mending Wall, I have already told you the title is very significant, it is very relevant. The meaning of the word mending. Mending means repairing. Here the poet speaks about repairing a wall. The first four lines, the poet says that there is something that doesn't love a wall. He does not say anything about what that something is. So something clearly indicates that it is not a human being, it is something, not someone. So here he says there is something that doesn't love a wall, and that something makes the frozen ground under the wall swell, that something makes the frozen ground under the wall swell, and in spring season when the sun comes up, the ground beneath, the ice beneath the wall melts, and as a result, some of the boulders on this wall get spilled over, get knocked over. So he says there is something that doesn't love a wall, and that something sends the frozen ground beneath the wall swell. And later, when the sun comes up, some of these boulders are knocked over, spilled over. There is some science behind it. As the seasons change, in winter, the ground beneath the wall swells as it is frozen. The frozen ground beneath the wall swells. It expands. And in spring season, when the sun comes up, the ice melts, there is contraction. So there is that continuous expansion and contraction, and as a result, some of these boulders, some of these stones on the wall are knocked over, are spilled over. So this is the science behind it, but he does not say anything about the science or physics. Instead of that, he says there is something in nature that doesn't love a wall. So the point that he drives home is that nature does not like the very idea of wall. Nature doesn't like that very idea of restrictions or limitations. When these boulders are knocked over, when these stones are knocked over from the wall, gaps are formed, and these gaps are so huge that even two persons can pass through these gaps side by side. They can pass abreast, the expression used in the poem. They can pass abreast, that means they can pass side by side. That means the gaps are so huge. So this is the essence of the first four lines. This is the gist of the first four lines. There is something in nature that doesn't love a wall, and that something sends the frozen ground beneath the wall to swell, and when the sun comes up, what happens? The ice beneath it melts and it knocks over some of the boulders on the wall, and huge gaps are formed. These gaps are so huge that even two persons can pass through these gaps side by side. There is a figure of speech used in the very first line of the stanza. The figure of speech used is assonance, a repetition of vowel sounds. You can find a repetition of vowel sounds in the first line. Something that doesn't love a wall. The a sound in something doesn't love. So the vowel sound, the vowel a gets repeated in all these words, and we can find that example of assonance. As far as non-native speakers are concerned, it is very difficult for us to identify examples of assonance in a poem, but it is very easy for us to identify alliteration in poems, because it is the repetition of initial sounds of adjacent or closely related syllables or words. Most of the tongue twisters are examples of alliteration. It is very easy for us to identify these examples of alliteration in poetry. I have already told you, most of the tongue twisters are examples of alliteration. Listen to this tongue twister. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled pepper, where is the peck of pickled pepper Peter Piper picked? So it is a tongue twister, and you can easily detect, identify the first sound which gets repeated throughout the lines. Per sound gets repeated throughout the lines. So it is very easy for a reader to identify alliterations, examples of alliteration in poetry. I have already explained the first 4 lines. I hope that you get some idea about the poem Mending Wall, some idea about the poet Robert Frost and his poems. So the remaining lines will be explained in the coming sessions. That's all for the day. Thank you.